Welcome to channel Unveiling Mysteries. Born into a family of North Korean spies, she spent half her life as a secret agent. Her best weapon was a honey trap, and over 100 high-ranking South Korean officials had slept with her. In return, she provided countless intelligence reports to North Korea, but ultimately, she voluntarily surrendered to South Korea. So what led this beautiful and ruthless spy to become a weak woman, crying in court? This is a case with fascinating details, so please sit down and join me as I uncover the full story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to receive exciting daily videos. On September 10, 2008, the Seoul Central District Court in South Korea held a special public trial. Normally, anyone with valid information who passed security checks could enter and observe a case, but this public trial was different. All South Korean citizens and media who wished to observe had to submit an application 2 to 3 days in advance. Their backgrounds would then be checked, and the final decision would be made by the South Korean prosecution and security agencies. During the trial, South Korean special forces and Seoul police also surrounded the areas around the courthouse, enforcing martial law. The reason for such strict security was due to the female spy who was about to stand trial. Her name was Won Jong-hwa. During her 7 years living in South Korea, Won slept with over 100 South Korean officers to steal countless intelligence reports and send them back to North Korea. Under South Korean law, this act of espionage is considered a crime endangering national security, so there would normally be no public hearing. However, due to the highly typical nature of Won's methods and identity during her espionage activities, and to raise public awareness, the Seoul Central District Court decided to hold a public trial. During the trial, Won made her first public appearance. She had lost her former charm, her face clearly showing fatigue, haggardness, and emaciation. When she spoke her first words, she even trembled greatly. Those watching truly couldn't believe that this was the female agent who had participated in espionage for many years. Before the official trial, people heard the judge state that she had submitted 2 letters of surrender to the South Korean government, which sparked extensive public discussion. A woman professionally trained for many years, a cold-blooded female spy who killed without batting an eye. Why did she confess immediately after being caught? Was she sincerely admitting her guilt, or deliberately exploiting this to make the South Korean government lower its guard? Won had a prior criminal record, so this time, the court thoroughly interrogated her actions. Within 50 minutes, there were 261 types of physical evidence proving Won's guilt, all listed one by one. Won was born in 1974 in North Korea to parents who were both spies. A few months after she was born, her father failed a mission and was killed. When Won was 2 years old, to ease her life's burden, her mother remarried a man named Kim Dong-sun. He was also a North Korean agent and became her stepfather. Later, her mother had 2 more children in this new family. Won didn't feel very happy. She rarely received affection from her stepfather, and her mother had to take care of the younger children, so she didn't have time to pay attention to Won either. Gradually, Won became quite rebellious and extreme. In North Korea, the children of martyrs receive special treatment, so as a young girl, Won never lacked material comforts. She also received a good education and was often praised for being very intelligent. In 1988, while Won was in college, she received the prestigious Dual Red Flag Badge, an honor only open to exceptionally brilliant students. In her second year of university, with a strong foundation and excellent grades, Won was sent to the Special Forces Political and Military University in Pyongyang, officially beginning her spy training. Won embraced all the training courses, including Taekwondo, driving, demolition, and marksmanship. She received high-intensity spy skill training. Won also thoroughly studied Korean and Japanese in preparation for future espionage missions. According to the plan, Won would focus her attacks on South Korea and Japan in the near future. In addition to basic language training, Won also specifically studied local dialects and geography of South Korea and Japan. She carefully learned every detail about local cuisine and customs. After 3 years of arduous training, Won transformed from an innocent, lively young girl into a beautiful, resolute, and cold-blooded female operative. In 1992, Won Jonghwa was about to graduate and officially begin her espionage career. But an unfortunate incident occurred. During a training exercise, she was accidentally severely injured, leaving her with sequelae in her brain and leg. This meant Won was no longer qualified for spy work. Her 3 years of hard training became useless. Although Won was unwilling, she could only be discharged from service and return to her hometown as arranged. North Korean agents typically hold high social status, and the government provides them with special benefits and favorable material conditions, including a house and a car. This was supposed to be what Won would enjoy, but now it had all fallen apart. Even more tragically, in 1994, a famine broke out in North Korea. Even in the capital, Pyongyang, many people died of starvation. After returning to a normal life, Won had no skills to support herself. She also didn't want to seek help from her stepfather, so she could only rely on government relief food. However, the famine worsened, and often there was no food for 1 or 2 months. She frequently suffered from hunger and even planned with friends to steal food from supermarkets. Despite her past injury, Won's skills still far surpassed ordinary people. She often succeeded in her thefts, which made her feel complacent. However, during one theft, Won was caught red-handed and sentenced to 2 years in prison for theft. After serving her sentence due to her criminal record, Won couldn't even find a decent job. Therefore, Won could only return to her old ways, gathering friends to steal. In 1996, when Won and her accomplices were stealing precious metals from a factory, they accidentally encountered the police. Her friends, to protect her, were caught, while she drove off in a truck carrying 5 tons of zinc. Stealing precious metals in North Korea, even 1 kilogram, is a serious crime, not to mention her truck carrying 5 tons. Won understood that if she was caught this time, she would certainly face a very long sentence. So, she gritted her teeth, took a portion of the zinc, and smuggled it directly into China. Won, then posing as a refugee fleeing the famine, spent 2 years in hiding in a small town in Jilin, China. In the initial stage, she sold the stolen zinc for a sum of money. Afterward, with a spirit of not fearing hardship, she started a small business there. At that time, she was considered to have a life free from worries about food and clothing, but Won was always very lonely and helpless by herself in China. She frequently missed her family and friends in North Korea. So, she began to think of ways to send letters to her family. Won hoped they could plead on her behalf to gain understanding from the North Korean government and allow her to return home. But what Won didn't know was that when she fled to China 2 years prior, she had become a target of the North Korean spy organization in China, who hoped that this excellent former special agent student could become an intelligence spy. 2 years passed. Won's refugee identity was trusted by China, but she remained loyal to North Korea. The leader of the North Korean State Security Department believed the time was right, so they sent someone to contact Won, enticing her to rejoin the organization and continue operating as a spy in China. Since North Korea entered its era of great famine in the 1990s, Many people, unable to endure the impoverished life and oppressive political system, defected from North Korea. Many of these included high-ranking government officials and businessmen. They were referred to by the North Korean government as traitors. Among them, because South Korea always believed itself to be the legitimate sovereign state on the Korean peninsula, North Korean defectors were particularly welcomed. However, the North Korean government would never allow this. They would send spies specifically to capture defectors and repatriate them to face detention, labor, re-education, and other punishments. After Won became a spy, her first mission was to track defectors in northeast China. From 1999 to 2001, within 2 years, Won, leveraging her own background and excellent professional skills, provided the North Korean government with the addresses and information of over 100 defectors. Most of these individuals were subsequently arrested and sent back to North Korea for detention in labor camps. High-ranking leaders of the North Korean State Security Department discovered a huge advantage she possessed. Won had a boldness unlike traditional North Korean women. Due to her lack of discipline from a young age, she was also unlike other North Korean women in male-female relationships. On the contrary, she was very open. During her escape, she even used her body to gain help from a man. When collecting information about defectors, she also used her beauty to take shortcuts. For Won, these acts were not a big deal. Sleeping with a man was merely a means to an end. This open-minded personality was something many North Korean female agents did not possess. Additionally, Won was naturally petite and cute, the type many men found attractive. Therefore, the security office came up with a more suitable place for Won to carry out her mission: South Korea. In October 2001, Won received orders to infiltrate South Korea according to her assigned work. Her work during her time in South Korea would be provided by her stepfather, Kim Dong-sun. After receiving the orders to obtain some information about South Korea, she specifically took the initiative to approach a Korean businessman operating in northeast China. After the two established a relationship, Won got the information she wanted. But soon after, Won discovered that this businessman had no intention of returning to South Korea. This also meant that Won could not use him to cross the border. After concluding he had lost his value, she found a reason to break up with him. However, not long after they broke up, Won discovered she was pregnant. When she was about to abort, she was stopped by the North Korean security agency. They thought that keeping the baby would bring Won more benefits, and she followed their advice. When the baby was a few months old, she immediately became an ethnic Korean from China. She met and befriended a South Korean man at a dating agency. He was attracted by Won's feminine charm. They slept together smoothly. A month later, Won informed him that she was pregnant and wanted him to take her back to South Korea to get married. This duped man, of course, could not refuse, but he never expected that after Won married him in South Korea and obtained South Korean citizenship, she would file for divorce. Once Won successfully divorced and gave birth to a daughter, she began planning her espionage activities. This time, she had two main missions. The first mission was to obtain identification information of North Korean defectors, with primary targets such as Hwang Jang-yeop, the former secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea, and defector leader Kim Yong-hwa. The superior's requirement was that assassination could be carried out if necessary. The second mission was to steal information from the South Korean military and intelligence agencies. One thought that compared to the identity of a normal divorced mother, the identity of a North Korean defector could help her more in infiltrating the highest levels of the South Korean government. She proactively surrendered to the South Korean National Intelligence Service, stating that she was just a North Korean defector. She hoped she could start a new life with the help of the South Korean government. South Korea has always been very lenient with North Korean defectors. After verifying that Won's statements were true, the South Korean government immediately approved her application for long-term residency. She immediately contacted her stepfather and had him prepare some money, intending to open a fish trading company and use it as a stepping stone to enter South Korea's upper class. There has always been no separation between money and power in Korea. With a background as a trading company, she soon successfully established herself in the elite circles and became an excellent, beautiful businesswoman. Gradually, more and more figures in the South Korean military and political circles wanted to know her. On one hand, these South Korean politicians wanted to receive financial support from Won. On the other hand, many high-ranking officials among them were attracted by her beauty, so they wanted a romantic relationship. Won was willing to indulge anyone. She very skillfully used her body to exchange for information. Occasionally, she would use seafood trading as an excuse to travel to China. In fact, transferring the acquired information to the North Korean State Security Department's stronghold in China. In 2004, Won was tasked with assassinating 2 South Korean agents. She prepared syringes and poison, but before the night of the operation, the North Korean Security Agency reconsidered, believing that carrying out the assassination mission would very likely expose Won's identity. Furthermore, this woman, posing as a beautiful agent, would be more effective in gathering information. Ultimately, the North Korean Security Agency temporarily canceled the operation. Won continued to use her honey trap to collect intelligence. She exploited her divorced status to register with a dating agency and then repeatedly dated military personnel and politicians. If there was any obstruction, she would use her beauty to seduce them. In the end, Won did use the honey trap method to obtain information on over 100 South Korean soldiers, which she then sent back to North Korea. In her last date, Won met Captain Park, who was managing military secrets and information on North Korean defectors. He was only 25 years old and not yet fully mature or experienced in all aspects. So, Won repeated her tactic, living with him. Captain Park was also concerned that the woman, who was 7 years his senior, might feel inferior in their relationship. He almost always met Won's requests, even agreeing without hesitation when she wanted to see military aircraft. Thus, Won had Captain Park in her grasp to successfully achieve her mission goals, obtaining the personal information and addresses of Hwang Jang-yeop, Kim Yong-hwa, and others. Hwang Jang-yeop was the former secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea. He was an extremely important figure in North Korea. After his defection to South Korea, he was tightly protected by the South Korean military. Without an introduction, it was almost impossible to see him. Therefore, Won set her sights on another North Korean defector, Kim Yong-hwa. He was the leader of a group of North Korean defectors in South Korea and also had frequent close contact with Hwang Jang-yeop. Compared to Hwang Jang-yeop, the South Korean protection for him was not as strict. It would be much easier for Won to start with Kim Yong-hwa. So, with Captain Park's help, Won arranged a private dinner with Kim. Throughout the meal, she flirted and tried her best to please Kim Yong-hwa. She also tried to persuade him to drink alcohol to lower his guard. After 3 rounds of drinks, Kim was a bit tipsy. Won, who had specifically trained her drinking capacity beforehand, was still very sober. Seeing that the fish was about to bite, she slowly approached Kim Yong-hwa and pulled down his trousers. Alcohol and beauty took turns to slightly excite Kim. Won seized this opportunity to propose to him and asked to meet Hwang Jang-yeop. Unexpectedly, even in his excitement, he still felt something was off. Kim had been in South Korea for many years, and it wasn't that no agents had approached him. It was just that no one had succeeded yet. Therefore, Kim Yong-hwa's vigilance remained very high. As soon as he realized something was wrong, he immediately pushed Won away and called the waiter to pay the bill. Then, Kim hailed a taxi for her to return. This mission not only failed, but also aroused Kim Yong-hwa's suspicion. So she no longer dared to act recklessly. Afterwards, Kim sought out Captain Park and told him about his suspicions. It wasn't that Captain Park didn't realize the problem. A North Korean defector beside her had also asked him for military information. As a soldier, he had also formed his own judgment about one's identity. But when a man is in love, he loses his reason. He didn't care about her identity, nor did he care about her motives for approaching him. He simply accepted her as long as she could be by his side. Therefore, he used that information to keep her with him. Consequently, Captain Park told Won that she was suspected of being a spy, but he would help her conceal her identity. After Won heard Captain Park's words, her heart stirred a little. This was the first time someone had stood by her without reason. However, for her, love between young people was just a normal thing. The moment Captain Park fell deeply in love with her was also considered the best opportunity to infiltrate the South Korean military. One knew that the South Korean military had invited North Korean defectors as security consultants to explain to them about the political, economic, military, cultural, and other aspects of the North Korean situation. Captain Park was the officer in charge of this area, and Won wanted Captain Park to add her to the list of lecturers. This was truly an extremely dangerous act. Once Won was discovered by the South Korean government, she would certainly be very thoroughly investigated. At that time, her identity as a spy could no longer be concealed. But Won also knew that if she didn't enter the tiger's den, she couldn't catch the cub. To get the information, she absolutely had to do it. From November 2006 to May 2007, Won lectured in military areas to South Korean soldiers. In her speeches, she used many TV and film works praising North Korea, propagating North Korea's political views intact. At the same time, she also mastered a large amount of information about the South Korean military. Won's bold and frequent actions aroused suspicion from others, but Won never underestimated her beauty. She considered it a sharp weapon. She used herself to bribe many officials. Therefore, all voices of suspicion were suppressed. Because of Won's outstanding abilities, the North Korean Security Office assigned her a new mission to go to Japan to gather information. Won repeated her old trick of starting to date Japanese men. She went to Japan 3 times to collect intelligence, but because she relied on Captain Park's protection for many years, Won's actions became increasingly bolder, meaning she also left vulnerabilities in many places. The South Korean government began to suspect her. This time, she was on a mission in Japan and was discovered by the South Korean intelligence agency due to her purposeful dating activities over the years. South Korea arrested Won, drawing a net around her, limiting her activities, but it was only then that she realized she had been exposed. Won prepared to leave South Korea to immediately flee to Japan. When Captain Park learned that Won was leaving, he also offered to go with her. Unfortunately, after everything was prepared, it was still one step too late. On July 15, 2008, Won was arrested by South Korean police. This time, a North Korean female spy was arrested in South Korea, attracting very high media attention. They vehemently condemned North Korea in every word and demanded an answer from the North Korean side. On September 4th, the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea officially responded to the issue. They said one was called a defector because she had fled North Korea long ago for fear of committing a crime. She was considered the greatest sinner in North Korea. And this espionage case was probably her own doing, colluding with South Korea to deliberately defame North Korea. The spokesman's intention was to completely deny one's role as a spy. After being imprisoned, she was uncooperative, and her spirits were very low. She could only rely on nutritional solutions to sustain herself. To make her cooperate, the South Korean intelligence agency sent a special person to provide psychological counseling. They brought her the notice issued by North Korea and said that if Won voluntarily confessed and sincerely surrendered to South Korea, the court would consider reducing her sentence. At the same time, social welfare agencies would help her take good care of her daughter. Perhaps it was her daughter that reawakened Won's desire to live, or perhaps it was North Korea's own actions that made her feel cold. Won could no longer endure the torture, both physical and mental, so she proactively signed the confession. At the same time, she also wrote 2 letters of surrender to South Korea, hoping that she and her daughter could continue to live in South Korea in the future. On September 10, 2008, Won Jong-hwa was publicly tried. She silently listened as the judge read out her charges. Only when she heard that Captain Park had also been arrested did her expression change. Her body trembled uncontrollably. Perhaps Won had once thought of spending the rest of her life with him, but now those thoughts were just wild desires. After 1 hour of trial, Won burst into tears as she was led away. On October 15th, the Seoul Central District Court issued its final verdict against Won Jong-hwa. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison for violating South Korea's national security law. Won did not object to this verdict. 5 years later, the beautiful spy who once shook South Korea was released from prison. She met her daughter. The South Korean government also upheld its commitments, allowing her and her daughter to continue living in South Korea. Now, Won finally has a normal life. Don't forget to subscribe to the Unveiling Mysteries channel to always receive the latest videos that help you achieve success in life. Thank you for following and accompanying the channel.